So, Andriy, what should we expect from the Davos Economic Forum? They say Trump will come. There will also be a Russia representative and Ukraine too.
There are many things in play right now internationally, not least of which is the international rift over the president's declaration that he wants to seize Greenland. And this might derail any kind of proposed speeches that the United States had in mind for the president. Not in addition to that, we also have this new information coming out about the peace council that he has proposed, a peace council for which he is asking very not peaceful nations. We like to say at the United Nations that the charter includes the peace-seeking nation as a principle for every member of the United Nations. Here, we are openly, apparently, looking at nations like Russia and Belarus to add $1 billion into a fund and then be in charge of whatever peace process there would be in the Middle East and potentially over Ukraine. So a lot of these things are going to be addressed to the president directly by a lot of journalists. I don't know what the conversation is going to be like leader to leader, but we are hearing directly from the leaders of the United Kingdom, France, Germany. Oslo apparently got a letter from President Trump. But we are hearing directly in a way that we have not heard other nations ready to challenge President Trump, as well as send military personnel to Greenland as a show of force.
Interesting fact. Denmark decided to skip Davos because the Greenland conflict. Why did no one support them? France or Germany could have skipped it too.
Oh, I think it's more important to confront Donald Trump directly, sit down at meetings, show that the alliance is still together, but confront him privately at bilateral meetings or multilateral meetings, perhaps with President Trump, letting him know that this is a line that has been crossed and he cannot return from it. He needs to do something to correct this problem. We also know that Ukraine is hoping to have a sit down and some deals being signed, especially on reconstruction of Ukraine post-conflict. I don't believe that a conflict ending resolution will be signed, but we're definitely getting closer and closer between the two sides. After this weekend, we've had Mr. Budanov in Florida talking with the American delegation. This is in perhaps it is hoped that this is in preparation of some kind of deals being signed while President Zelensky and President Trump are in Davos.
Yeah, we talk about this situation, but I have one more question. Does it seem to you that EU countries want to hand Greenland over to Trump?
Are there countries that want to hand it over? No. And especially countries that have no stake whatsoever. So the entire African Union is very much opposed to this. Countries in small island nations in the Pacific, Micronesia, Southeast Asia, these are countries that without the international order, without the UN Charter, preventing the use of force against country sovereignties, all these international borders would easily be carved up by the strongest person in the neighborhood. Most notably, the Republic of Kenya stated this very clearly at the United Nations when Ukraine was invaded as part of the full-fledged invasion of 2022, and very clearly said that they did not draw their own borders. That was colonizers who drew the borders of Africa. And if the West chooses to throw this out and ignore violations of sovereignty, then we should expect to have a lot more international border disputes based on things that are not the international order or the UN Charter.
But if countries are not ready to give up Greenland, what real decisive actions do we actually see?
In terms of countering Trump, this is going to be the question. I think more than anything, the biggest development over the weekend has been the international deal making that both the European Union has made as well as Canada. Canada and China came to a historic agreement where for the first time we are going to have an influx of Chinese electric vehicles on North America that we have not had. This is something that the United States has been fighting against. Chinese electric vehicles are dominating the European market, dominating Africa and other countries. This continent has blocked it because the United States wanted to see a domestic electric car market develop to rival them. And Donald Trump has ceded that. He has allowed, pushed away, not allowed, he pushed away Canada, and they have turned to China for an economic development deal. And this includes allowing electric cars, which will absolutely dominate the Canadian market and soon the North American market. So President Trump made a mistake in pushing Canada, and this is his repercussion. The second repercussion we have seen is the European Union's long in the development deal with South American countries, a free trade agreement. This goes against President Trump's ideals of having tariffs on each nation. Other countries understand what the benefit is of having free trade zones, and Europe and South America are now set to benefit from this, and actually the United States will be hurt by this.
But you countries talk about big sanction in response. But are they really ready for that?
Well, I think they could try to do something like that. First and foremost, President Trump has announced that he will unilaterally put on emergency tariffs against countries that do not want to allow for the United States to take over Greenland. This doesn't exist in our laws. He has issued emergency tariffs against other countries, which is now at the point of being decided by the Supreme Court. But in those instances, he has cited the fact that countries have been allowing fentanyl. He has cited numerous other issues of why he should have the emergency power to do that. There is no emergency here. In fact, the Secretary of the Economy, Scott Bessent, just yesterday on American news shows pointed out that there is no precedent for this. There is no need for this. There's no emergency. When asked if there was emergency, that is going to be cited in an emergency petition in U.S. courts and the World Trade Organization to cancel these tariffs, or at least put a stay on them and not put them in place, because the administration did not coordinate this. This was simply the thought of President Trump, and he put it out there on his social media, and that's the extent of his wishes of what's going to happen. No lawyer reviewed this. There is no coordinated strategy. The Secretary of the Economy was not briefed on what he's supposed to be saying, and he basically gave the game away by saying this is not an emergency, and therefore there are no emergency powers to give President Trump.
Mm-hmm. And Peace Council, you talked about this earlier. Trump invited not only Putin, but also Lukashenko to
Yeah.
Peace Council.
Mhm.
I just want to ask, what the hell is going on?
Basically, there are two thoughts. One, people are wondering whether Donald Trump is proposing some kind of alternate version from the United Nations, where he would have a council of people who would decide international disputes. Unfortunately, this gives the game away, where you are, just like people have for decades complained why Russia, why Venezuela, why Iran are on the UN Human Rights Council, why countries that violate human rights are allowed to be there. Similarly, we are starting off this Peace Council immediately with violators of human rights, not just that, but also, one would say, state sponsors of terror. And therefore, this effort is doomed to fail. The only thing President Trump is looking for is $1 billion from each participant. And in that way, he will enrich himself even further.
Mm-hmm. Trump is basically building a peace council outside state institutions. It would be Trump's own body. Is that normal?
No, none of this is normal. Especially in the post-World War II order, where we put down fundamental rights for countries' sovereignty, the right for smaller nations to be treated to bigger nations, numerous principles that have led to an unprecedented amount of prosperity and safety for a growing portion of the world. Not for everybody. Everybody did not get safety. Everybody did not get rich. But that richness, that wealth, growth, and that safety has slowly spread over the world. Instead of encouraging that growth, President Trump is seeking to throw it out. And he is arguing that the United States has somehow been harmed because other nations are getting safer and wealthier. That's not a harm to the United States. That's a benefit, because more safety, more wealth in another country means more trade, which means the United States gets even wealthier in the end.
Polls say Americans are against taking Greenland by force. As many as 86% said no. Has Trump just pissed everyone off?
Well, yes. Well, one of the reasons that we look at polls is for election prognosticating. We have Senate and congressional elections in 2026 this year. However, it's become very clear that President Trump does not even care if if his party retains control of Congress. He has been acting entirely without the consent of Congress. He has frozen Congress by ordering the Speaker and the head of the Senate not to bring up legislation. We have seen increasing amounts of legislators use emergency petitions, like we saw for the Epstein files, but now those emergency petitions are being used for everything else because of the blocking by Speaker Johnson as well as Senator Thune. And in the end, this demonstrates that President Trump is willing to work outside of United States legislators and outside of U.S. law. This is what's happening in Minnesota. There's no precedent for deploying U.S. troops there. He said he would cite the Insurrection Act and send Alaskan military headquartered in Alaska to a cold state like Minnesota. And the deputy chief of staff for the White House said that Minnesota state and local police should surrender to United States military. This is all against the United States Constitution, against any kind of principle of law, and it seems as if the episode in Minnesota is demonstrating the type of disrespect that the president has, and just no interest in United States law. He wants to act unilaterally. He has shown that internationally with Greenland and other areas. He will start doing it in the United States as he is with this immigration enforcement.
How do you see the talks developing? I mean, between Ukraine, Russia, Trump, EU leaders. The Greenland issue has pushed the war against Ukraine out of the spotlight, and that's very bad.
It is, and it's not. Ukraine has gone in and out of the spotlight internationally, and especially in the United States, several times this year. But throughout the entire period, we have had U.S. and Ukrainian conversations happening all of 2025, continuing now. So these teams have worked more and more together, trying to draft language that all sides could work together. I think diplomatically, Ukraine needs to press ahead with that. But at the same time, it's very clear that Europe needs to increase its war industry, specifically in producing more and more material for Ukraine. They need to produce 155 millimeter shells. They need to produce and send over intermediate and longer range rockets to Ukraine. They need to send Ukraine the kind of anti-aircraft material that the United States used to send them, because the United States currently has budgeted for about $400 million of support for Ukraine, which the White House is blocking at this moment. So this is a piece of legislation that was signed just at the end of 2025 in December. And even that small amount of money, $400 million, which is very much less than the billions of dollars that the United States was sending over year after year. This is going to be a problem for Ukraine. And the only number of states who can fix this are Europe, and they need to speed up what they have not been doing for the first 3 years of the war.